My name is Alyssa, and I am 29 years old. I bought my dream home last year with the inheritance my mother left me before she passed away. My father remarried when I was 16 to a woman named Diane, and her daughter Jessica is now 22. At our last family dinner, Jessica announced she was pregnant. That is when my dad dropped the bomb. He wanted me to give up my house so Jessica and her boyfriend could move in. I was speechless. The audacity of his request left me stunned. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you're watching from. Hit like and subscribe to join me on this journey of standing up for myself against family pressure. I have always been independent and hardworking. After graduating with a marketing degree, I climbed my way up to become an executive at a digital marketing firm in downtown Seattle. My colleagues often comment on my determination, but they do not know that it comes from losing my mother at such a young age. Mom died from breast cancer when I was 14. I still remember the day the doctors told us there was nothing more they could do. She fought hard for 2 years, but in the end, cancer took her away from us. Before she passed, she made sure I would be taken care of. She left me her savings and a specific instruction that it should be used for my education, and eventually to help me buy a home of my own. My father did not waste much time finding a new wife. Just 2 years after Mom died, he married Diane, a woman he met at a business conference. Diane was everything my mother was not. Where Mom had been warm and selfless, Diane was cold and calculating. She cared deeply about appearances and social status. I tried to accept her for my father's sake, but we never developed a close relationship. Along with Diane came her daughter Jessica. From day one, Jessica was treated like a princess in our house. She was 12 when they moved in, and my father seemed determined to make up for the fact that her biological father was not in the picture. Whatever Jessica wanted, Jessica got. New clothes for school, Dad's credit card was ready. The latest phone, no problem. Trip to Cancun with friends for spring break. Dad would make it happen. Meanwhile, I stuck to my mother's plan. I used her money carefully, putting myself through college and saving the rest. I worked part-time jobs, applied for scholarships, and built my career step by step. By the time I was 28, I had enough saved combined with my inheritance to make a down payment on a house. 6 months ago, I found it. A small but perfect craftsman-style home with hardwood floors, a bay window in the living room, and a garden out back. The moment I walked in, I knew this was where I belonged. It was not extravagant, but it had character and charm. The previous owners had maintained the original woodwork, and the kitchen had just enough modern updates to make it functional while preserving its vintage appeal. The house reminded me of the one my mother always dreamed of owning. She used to cut out pictures from home magazines and create vision boards of her dream house. This place could have been pulled straight from those vision boards. When I got the keys, I felt like she was somehow with me, guiding me to this perfect spot. I poured my heart into making it my sanctuary. I painted the walls, planted flowers in the garden that had been my mother's favorites, and carefully selected furniture that balanced comfort with style. I hung photos of Mom in the hallway and placed her favorite books on a special shelf in the living room. Every corner of this house contained a piece of my heart and a connection to her memory. Throughout the years, I had grown accustomed to my father's pattern of prioritizing Jessica's needs over mine. When we were teenagers, I had to give up my bedroom because Jessica wanted it. My father said since I would be going to college soon anyway, it made sense for me to move into the smaller guest room. When I needed to use the car to get to my part-time job, Jessica often got priority for her social outings. Dad would just shrug and tell me to be more flexible. I tried to maintain boundaries while keeping the peace. I limited our family gatherings to once a month, politely deflected Diane's prying questions about my salary, and changed the subject whenever Jessica started comparing our lives. It was a delicate balance, but I managed it because I valued what little relationship I still had with my father. What I never expected was that they would set their sights on the one thing that was truly legally mine: my home. The home I had worked so hard for, the home that connected me to my mother. Looking back, I should have seen it coming. The pattern had been established long ago. But sometimes we blind ourselves to the obvious because we cannot bear to see the truth about the people we love. The night everything changed started like any other family dinner. I arrived at my father and Diane's suburban home with a bottle of wine and prepared for the usual subtle digs about my single status and my modest car. Jessica was already there along with her boyfriend Kyle, a wannabe musician with perpetually bloodshot eyes and an inability to hold down a job for more than a few weeks. Dad greeted me with a quick hug. "Alyssa, finally. We were about to start without you." "Sorry, had to finish up some work," I replied, though I had actually been exactly on time. It was just another small way they made me feel like an afterthought. Diane was arranging flowers in a vase that probably cost more than my monthly utility bills. "Well, you are here now. Jessica and Kyle have some exciting news." That should have been my first clue that something was up. Diane was practically vibrating with excitement, her eyes gleaming in a way they only did when she was about to one-up someone or when she had bought something extravagant. We sat down to dinner, and before we even finished the salad course, Jessica cleared her throat dramatically. "Everyone, Kyle and I have an announcement." She reached for his hand across the table. "We are having a baby!" The table erupted in excitement. Dad jumped up to hug Jessica, while Diane wiped away a theatrical tear. I mustered my most genuine smile and offered my congratulations, even though I had serious concerns. Jessica had never held a job for more than 3 months. Kyle's band had not had a paying gig in over a year. They lived in a tiny studio apartment that Kyle's friend owned and charged them minimal rent for. How were they planning to support a child? But I kept those thoughts to myself. Instead, I asked when the baby was due and listened as Jessica detailed her first trimester symptoms in graphic detail. It was after dessert was served that my father cleared his throat and turned to me with that look I had come to recognize. It was the look that said he was about to ask me for something that I would not want to give. "Alyssa, we need to discuss something important as a family," he began. "As you know, Jessica and Kyle's apartment is barely big enough for the two of them. Now with a baby on the way, they need a stable environment." I nodded, wondering where this was going, though a knot was already forming in my stomach. "So we were thinking," he continued, "that you could let Jessica and Kyle move into your house temporarily, just until they get on their feet as parents." The silence that followed felt endless. I looked around the table waiting for someone to laugh to say they were joking. But my father's expression was earnest. Diane was nodding encouragingly. Jessica looked at me with expectation, as though my answer was a foregone conclusion. "You want me to give up my house?" I finally managed to ask. Dad waved his hand dismissively. "Not give up, just share for a while. You are single, no kids. You could easily stay with friends or rent a small apartment temporarily. Your house has that extra bedroom that you are just using as an office. It would make a perfect nursery." The knot in my stomach tightened. "But it is my house. I bought it. I live there." "We know that, sweetie," Diane interjected with that condescending tone she had perfected. "But family helps family. Jessica needs stability right now." Jessica nodded vigorously. "The doctor said stress is bad for the baby. Our apartment has mold issues, and the neighborhood is not safe for a child." Kyle, who had been silently shoveling chocolate cake into his mouth, finally spoke. "Your place is way nicer than ours. That garden would be cool to hang out in." I sat there, my mind reeling. They were not asking me to lend them money or help them find a place. They were asking me to surrender my home, my sanctuary, to a couple who had never demonstrated any responsibility or ability to plan ahead. "I think the spare room would look great in yellow for the nursery," Jessica continued, as though my agreement was already secured. "And we might need to rearrange the living room to make space for the changing table." "And my drum set," Kyle added. Diane nodded, already mentally redecorating my house. "That furniture you have in the guest room could go to storage. We can make space in our garage for your things, Alyssa." They continued planning how they would take over my home while I sat in stunned silence. I could feel the weight of their expectations, the unspoken demand that I once again sacrifice my needs for Jessica's wants. I managed to get through the rest of the evening with non-committal responses. "I will have to think about it," I said as I left, though from their confident goodbyes, I do not think they believed there was anything to think about. In their minds, I would eventually say yes. I always had before. On the drive home, memories flooded back. Jessica borrowing my favorite sweater and returning it stained. My father missing my college graduation because Jessica had a minor fender bender the same day. The time Diane suggested I give Jessica my mother's pearl earrings because she would wear them more often. each instance where my feelings and needs had been treated as secondary. As I pulled into my driveway and looked at my beloved home illuminated by the porch light I had carefully selected, I felt a deep resentment building. This was my home, purchased with my mother's gift and my hard work, the one place where I felt her presence and my own strength. And they wanted me to hand it over because Jessica had made yet another impulsive decision. I went to bed that night with a heavy heart, unaware that their request at dinner was just the beginning of a pressure campaign that would test my limits and ultimately change my relationship with my family forever. The week after that fateful dinner was like being caught in a slow-motion avalanche. It started with a text from my father the very next morning. "Have you thought about what we discussed? Jessica is looking at paint samples already." By that evening, he had called twice, each time framing his request as a reasonable expectation. "This is what families do," he insisted. "Your mother would want you to help your sister." That particular statement cut deep. Mom had been generous and kind, but she had also taught me the value of hard work and boundaries. I doubted she would have expected me to give up my home for someone who had made no effort to secure their own stable living situation. 3 days after the dinner, I was invited to Sunday lunch at my Aunt Linda's house. Linda was my father's sister, and I had always gotten along well with her. When I arrived, I was surprised to find my father, Diane, Jessica, and Kyle already there along with several other relatives. Over salad, my father cleared his throat and announced, "We have some wonderful news. Alyssa has generously offered to let Jessica and Kyle move into her house while they prepare for the baby." All eyes turned to me, faces beaming with approval for my supposed sacrifice. My aunt patted my hand. "That is so kind of you, dear. So selfless." I opened my mouth to correct the misinformation, but found myself frozen under the weight of everyone's expectation and approval. The words stuck in my throat. Later, as I was helping clear the dishes, my attempt to clarify with my aunt was interrupted by Jessica showing everyone nursery ideas on her phone. "Alyssa's spare room is perfect for this design," she gushed. "We are thinking of painting it next weekend." I left that lunch feeling like I was losing control of the narrative and my life, but worse was yet to come. The following Tuesday, I returned home from work to find Jessica and Kyle in my driveway. Jessica waved cheerfully as I parked. "Dad gave us his key so we could take some measurements," she explained, as though this was perfectly normal. "The movers need to know if our sofa will fit through your door." I stood there, keys in hand, watching as they entered my home without waiting for my permission. I followed them in to find Jessica in my spare room, arms outstretched, as Kyle measured the wall dimensions. "This desk will have to go," she said, gesturing to the antique writing desk I had carefully restored. "It takes up too much space and we will need room for the crib." "And my gaming setup," Kyle added, eyeing the built-in bookshelves that housed my collection of classic literature. I managed to keep my composure, but inside I was screaming. "I have not actually agreed to any of this yet," I said as firmly as I could. Jessica looked at me with genuine confusion. "But Dad said it was all arranged. We have already given notice on our apartment. We move out at the end of the month." That night my father called again. "Jessica mentioned you seemed upset when they visited today. Is there a problem?" I took a deep breath. "Dad, I never agreed to let them move in. You all just assumed." There was a long pause. "Alyssa, we discussed this at dinner. Your sister needs your help." "We discussed it, but I never said yes." His voice took on that disappointed tone I had grown to dread. "I thought you would have moved past this selfishness by now. Your sister is having a baby." "My grandchild. Are you really going to put your comfort above the welfare of an innocent baby?" The conversation continued in this vein for nearly an hour. Every time I tried to establish a boundary, he found a way to make me feel selfish and cold-hearted. By the time we hung up, I felt drained and confused. Was I being unreasonable? The next day, I discovered Jessica had posted on social media, "So grateful to my amazing sister for giving us a place to start our family, had best Seaver ever." The post had dozens of comments praising her, and by extension me. I felt trapped in a narrative I had never agreed to. Then Diane called. "Jessica told me you are having second thoughts," she said without preamble. "I am very disappointed in you, Alyssa. Family comes first." Always. Your father has done so much for you over the years. When I tried to point out that this was a huge ask, not a small favor, she scoffed. It is temporary. And it is not like you cannot afford to rent a small apartment for a while. You make good money. That is not the point, I tried to explain. This is my home. It is just a house, Diane replied. Jessica needs it more than you do right now. After a week of this constant pressure, I confided in my best friend Madison over coffee. They want me to move out of my own house so Jessica and her boyfriend can live there, I explained, still hardly believing it myself. Madison's eyes widened. They what? That is insane. You cannot seriously be considering it. Her reaction was validating. At least someone thought the request was as outrageous as I did. Stand firm, Madison advised. If you give in on this, where does it end? Next, they will be asking you to pay their bills or take care of their kid while they go on vacation. I knew she was right, but the constant pressure was wearing me down. My work performance was suffering. I found myself making errors in presentations and missing deadlines, something that had never happened before. At night, I lay awake worrying. What if I said no, and my father never forgave me? What if saying no meant losing what little family I had left? But what would saying yes cost me? My peace, my sanctuary, the connection to my mother that this house represented. The most painful moment came when my father called late one evening. Your mother would be disappointed in your attitude, he said quietly. She taught you to be generous, to put family first. This behavior is not what she would have wanted for you. I ended the call feeling gutted. Had I misremembered my mother? Would she really have expected me to give up something so important? As if the emotional manipulation was not enough, I discovered through a mutual acquaintance that Jessica and Kyle had been evicted from their previous apartment for non-payment of rent and property damage. The current apartment they lived in belonged to Kyle's friend, who was letting them stay for minimal rent out of pity. This was not a temporary rough patch. This was a pattern of irresponsibility. The sleepless nights continued. I began to question my own judgment. Maybe I was being selfish. Maybe this was what family was supposed to mean. Maybe I should just give in for the sake of peace. What I did not realize was that the situation was about to reach a breaking point that would force me to make a decision once and for all. The breaking point came on a Saturday afternoon, exactly 2 weeks after the initial dinner. I was in my garden planting new tulip bulbs in memory of my mother. It was her favorite flower, and I had been gradually creating a perennial garden with all the blooms she had loved. It was meditative work connecting me to her memory as I pressed each bulb into the soil. The sound of car doors slamming jolted me from my peaceful state. I looked up to see my father's SUV in my driveway, along with a pickup truck I recognized as belonging to Kyle's friend. My father, Diane, Jessica, and Kyle all emerged along with 2 of Kyle's friends. They were unloading boxes and what appeared to be furniture from the pickup. I stood up, brushing dirt from my hands, and walked toward them in disbelief. What is going on? My father smiled as though this was the most normal situation in the world. We thought we would help you get started with the move. These boxes are for your things. Kyle's friends have offered to help carry the heavier furniture. I stared at them, unable to process what was happening. They had brought boxes to my house to pack up my things without my consent. I never agreed to this, I said, my voice coming out stronger than I expected. I never said they could move in. My father waved his hand dismissively. You were taking too long to make arrangements. The baby will not wait, Alyssa. Jessica needs to get settled. Jessica stepped forward, her hand resting protectively on her barely visible baby bump. We thought we would start with the guest room. The movers are coming next weekend for our stuff, so we need your room cleared out by then. My room, I repeated. You mean my office in my house? Well, technically it will be the nursery, Jessica corrected. And we were thinking about the garden too. All these flowers take up so much space. We would need room for a swing set eventually. I looked back at my carefully tended garden, each plant chosen with love and memory. The rose bushes I had planted for Mom's birthday. The herb garden she had taught me to tend when I was a child. You want to remove my garden? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Kyle, who had been unloading a box, shrugged. Kids need space to play, and I was thinking we could put a fire pit out here. Great for when my band wants to hang out after practice. I felt something inside me start to crack. The careful facade of compliance I had maintained for years was beginning to splinter. My father must have sensed my resistance building because he pulled me aside with a hand on my arm. "I have already told everyone at the office about your generosity," he said quietly, "how you are helping your sister in her time of need. Everyone is so impressed with your selflessness." Another manipulation tactic. Another way to box me in so I could not say no without looking like the villain. "By the way," Diane added, joining our conversation, "we assume you will continue paying the mortgage while they are here. They cannot afford to contribute much with the baby coming and all the expenses that entails." The cracks widened. They not only wanted my home, but they expected me to finance their living situation as well. As they continued unloading boxes, I followed them inside, watching in horror as they began discussing my space as though I was already gone. "This couch is too bulky," Diane commented, eyeing my comfortable sectional that I had saved for months to purchase. "We should get something more modern in here. And we will need to rearrange everything to fit the changing table and playpen," Jessica added. Kyle was examining my entertainment center. "Sweet sound system. This will be perfect for my music." I stood in my own living room feeling like a ghost, invisible, unimportant, my opinions and feelings completely disregarded. Then came the moment that broke me entirely. Jessica wandered into my bedroom, something I had not invited her to do, and emerged wearing a delicate silver necklace with a small sapphire pendant. "I found this in your jewelry box," she said casually. "It would look perfect with my blue maternity dress for the baby shower." That necklace had been my mother's. One of the few personal items I had left of hers. She had worn it every day during her illness, and my father had given it to me after she died. It was my most treasured possession. "Take it off," I said, my voice trembling. "Take it off right now." Jessica looked startled. "What? It is just a necklace. I was going to give it back. It was my mother's. Take it off." Something in my tone must have conveyed the severity of the violation, because Jessica unclasped the necklace and handed it back with uncharacteristic silence. After they finally left with promises to return the next day with more boxes, I sat in my living room clutching my mother's necklace and broke down, deep, racking sobs that came from years of swallowing my feelings of putting others first, of being the reasonable one, the accommodating one, the one who sacrificed. That night I called my mother's sister, Aunt Sarah, with whom I had maintained a close relationship over the years. I poured out the whole story through tears and exhaustion. There was a long silence when I finished. Then Aunt Sarah spoke words that changed everything. "Your mother never intended for you to be a doormat, Alyssa. The inheritance she left you was not just money. It was freedom. Freedom from having to depend on your father or anyone else. She wanted you to build your own life on your own terms." She paused, then continued more gently. "Your father has been taking advantage of your kind heart for years. He used your grief and your desire to maintain a connection with him to manipulate you. This house situation is just the most extreme example." Her words hit me like a revelation. She was right. From the moment my mother died, I had been so afraid of losing my only remaining parent that I had allowed him to dictate the terms of our relationship. I had surrendered my power bit by bit, concession by concession. "What would Mom really want for me?" I asked through my tears. "She would want you to stand up for yourself," Aunt Sarah replied without hesitation. "She was always so proud of your strength, even when you were little. She would not want you to give up your home, your sanctuary, your connection to her." As we talked further, Aunt Sarah revealed more truths. How my mother had specifically set up the inheritance in a way that my father could not access it. How she had expressed concerns about his tendency to favor Jessica even before she died. How she had worried that I would be sidelined once she was gone. I hung up the phone with a new clarity. This pattern of emotional manipulation had gone on long enough. It was time to break the cycle. It was time to honor my mother's real wishes by standing up for myself and the home she had helped me create. I went to bed that night with a decision made. I would not be moving out. This was my house bought with my money, filled with my memories and my mother's spirit. And I would fight to keep it even if it meant confronting my father in a way I never had before. The next morning, I woke up with a sense of purpose I had not felt in years. The decision to stand firm had been made, but I knew I needed support and preparation to face the inevitable confrontation. This would not be easy, but it was necessary. Not just for my home, but for my self-respect. First, I called my therapist, Dr. Reynolds, whom I had been seeing occasionally since my mother's death. She fit me in for an emergency session that afternoon. What you are describing is a clear pattern of emotional manipulation. Dr. Reynolds confirmed after I explained the situation. Your father and stepfamily have come to expect your compliance. When you show signs of asserting a boundary, they increase the pressure. It is a common dynamic in blended families, especially when one child is consistently favored. But am I being selfish? I asked, still haunted by my father's accusations. Is it wrong to refuse to help when Jessica is pregnant? Dr. Reynolds leaned forward. Alyssa, there is a difference between being selfish and having healthy boundaries. Asking you to temporarily loan the money or help find an apartment would be a reasonable family request. Expecting you to surrender your home while continuing to pay for it is exploitative. She helped me work through the guilt and fear I felt about confronting my family. We role-played responses to potential emotional triggers and accusations. By the end of our session, I felt more prepared for what lay ahead. Next, I met with Madison and 2 other close friends for dinner. I needed to strengthen my support system outside my family. You need to change your locks immediately, Madison advised. If your father has a key and is willing to let them in without your permission, you cannot trust them not to move in while you're at work. That my other friend Tasha, who worked in real estate, added, you should also check your legal rights. It is your property, so you have every right to refuse entry. If they try to move in against your wishes, that is trespassing. That night, I researched tenant rights and homeowner protections. I learned that even if I did allow them to move in temporarily, getting them to leave could become a legal nightmare. Once they established residency, I would need formal eviction proceedings to remove them if they refused to leave. Given their history of irresponsibility, that seemed like a very real possibility. The next day, I took a personal day from work and had my locks changed. I installed a simple security system with a doorbell camera. I was not taking any chances. I spent the afternoon on a video call with Aunt Sarah, drawing strength from her stories about my mother. She sent me photos I had never seen before of Mom in the garden of her childhood home, tending the same types of flowers I now grew in my garden. It reinforced my conviction that protecting this house was also protecting my connection to her. Your mother stood up to your father many times during their marriage, Aunt Sarah revealed. He has always had this tendency to bulldoze over others' feelings. She would want you to advocate for yourself the way she taught you. That evening, I sat down and drafted an email to my father, Diane, and Jessica, clearly stating my position. I want to clarify something that seems to have been misunderstood. I will not be moving out of my home. I sympathize with Jessica and Kyle's situation, but my house is not available as a solution to their housing needs. I am happy to help research affordable apartments in safe neighborhoods, or assist in other ways that do not involve surrendering my home. I hope we can move forward with mutual respect for each other's boundaries. I read it over several times, making sure it was firm but not antagonistic. I did not send it yet. This needed to be done in person. Before bed, I called 2 of my mother's siblings and my maternal grandmother. I needed to shore up family support from those who would be on my side. They all confirmed what Aunt Sarah had told me my mother would want me to protect what was mine. My grandmother was particularly direct. That house was bought with Martha's money. Your mother would roll over in her grave if she knew Jessica was trying to take it from you. The next day, I practiced responses to the arguments I knew would come. In front of my bathroom mirror, I rehearsed phrases like, I understand you are disappointed, but my decision is final. I'm sorry you feel that way, but this is my home and not open for negotiation. I am happy to help in other ways, but not by giving up my house. I practiced keeping my voice calm and my posture confident. I anticipated tears from Jessica, anger from my father, and cold manipulation from Diane. I prepared for all of it. For self-care, I treated myself to a massage to release the physical tension that had built up. I went for a long walk in the park to clear my head. I cooked my mother's favorite pasta recipe for dinner, feeling her presence with me. On Friday evening, I texted my father, I would like to have a family meeting at my house tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. to discuss the housing situation. Please make sure everyone can attend. He replied almost immediately. Good, we will bring the rest of the boxes. He had completely missed or deliberately ignored my intent. He still thought I was going along with their plan. It reinforced my resolve to make my position crystal clear. I hardly slept that night, but it was not from doubt. It was from a strange mixture of anxiety and anticipation. Tomorrow would change my family dynamic forever, but it was a necessary change. In the morning, I dressed carefully in an outfit that made me feel confident and strong. A blue blouse my mother had always loved on me, well-fitted jeans, and the sapphire necklace. I made coffee and set out some pastries, a habit of hospitality my mother had instilled in me. But I also positioned myself strategically in the living room, in my favorite armchair, determined not to be physically intimidated or cornered. As I waited for their arrival, I touched the sapphire pendant and whispered, "This one's for you, Mom." At exactly 10 a.m., the doorbell rang. Through the new security camera, I could see my father standing on the porch with Diane, Jessica, and Kyle. My father had a determined look on his face. Kyle was chewing gum, looking bored. Jessica was checking her reflection in her phone camera. Diane was surveying my front yard with an appraising eye that made my skin crawl. I took a deep breath, squared my shoulders, and opened the door. "Good morning," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Come in." They filed into my living room. My father was carrying a stack of flattened cardboard boxes. Kyle had a roll of packing tape. Their intentions were clear. "We brought some more packing supplies," my father announced. "And Kyle's friends will be here in about an hour with their truck to help move the heavier furniture." I remained standing, making no move to take the boxes or offer them seats. "Before anything else happens, we need to talk." My father set down the boxes with an impatient sigh. "Alyssa, we have been talking for weeks. It is time for action. Jessica and Kyle need to get settled before the baby comes." I met his gaze directly. "I understand that Jessica and Kyle need a place to live, but it will not be my house. I am not moving out." There was a moment of stunned silence. Then my father laughed a short, dismissive sound. "Very funny. Now we were thinking we should start with the spare room today, and then next weekend we can tackle the master bedroom." "Dad, I am not joking," I said firmly. "I am not giving up my house. Not temporarily, not at all." The smile faded from his face as he realized I was serious. "Alyssa, we have been through this. Your sister needs help." "And I am willing to help in many ways," I replied. "I can help them look for apartments. I can contribute to a security deposit. But I will not give them my home." Jessica stepped forward, one hand on her stomach, in what I had come to recognize as her default manipulation pose. "But what about the baby? Do you want your niece or nephew living in some terrible apartment? How selfish can you be?" I had anticipated this exact approach. "Jessica, many people raise healthy, happy children in apartments. What is important is having responsible parents who create a safe and loving environment. That has nothing to do with house size or having a yard." Diane's eyes narrowed. "I cannot believe what I am hearing. After everything your father has done for you over the years, this is how you repay him, by refusing to help your sister in her time of need." "I have offered several ways to help," I reminded her. "In fact, I spent yesterday researching family housing options that might work for their situation." My father's face was darkening with anger. "This is ridiculous. We have already made arrangements. Jessica has given notice on her apartment. I have told everyone about this arrangement." "An arrangement I never agreed to," I pointed out. "You all made assumptions without my consent." Kyle, who had been examining my sound system with covetous eyes, finally joined the conversation. "Look, we need a decent place. This house is perfect. You can crash somewhere else for a while. What is the big deal?" The casual entitlement in his voice made my blood boil, but I kept my tone even. "The big deal, Kyle, is that this is my legal property purchased with my money and I live here. I have no obligation to give it to anyone." My father took a step toward me, using the physical intimidation tactic that had worked when I was younger. I held my ground. "You are being completely unreasonable," he said, his voice rising. "This is what family does. They help each other." "Help goes both ways, Dad," I replied. "When have Jessica or Diane ever been asked to sacrifice for me? When have you ever asked them to give up something important for my benefit? That struck a nerve. He faltered briefly before regrouping. That is different. They have not had the advantages you have had. You mean the inheritance from my dead mother? I asked quietly. The money she left specifically for me to build a secure future. That advantage. Jessica made a sound of exasperation. Why do you always have to bring up your mother? She has been gone for 15 years. Get over it already. The room went silent. Even Diane looked shocked at Jessica's callousness. That was completely inappropriate, I said, my voice low but firm. My mother and my relationship with her are not up for discussion or dismissal. I turned back to my father. I have prepared some information on family housing resources. There are several apartments in safe neighborhoods with rent assistance programs for expectant parents. I am happy to go through these options with Jessica and Kyle. I held out a folder containing the research I had done. Nobody took it. We do not want alternatives, my father said stiffly. We want this house. It makes the most sense. For whom? I challenged. It makes sense for Jessica and Kyle. It makes no sense for me. So you are just going to refuse to help? Diane asked incredulously. You are going to make your pregnant sister live in some awful apartment because you will not be slightly inconvenienced for a few months? I recognized the manipulation tactic. They were trying to reframe my reasonable boundary as selfish cruelty. First of all, I said, addressing Diane directly, we both know this would not be for a few months. There has been no discussion of an end date or conditions for them moving out. Second, being displaced from my own home is not a slight inconvenience. And third, many apartments are perfectly nice places to live, as you well know. My father's patience was visibly wearing thin. Enough of this nonsense. We had an agreement. No, Dad, you had an expectation. There was never an agreement. Kyle, clearly bored with the conversation, wandered over to my bookshelf and started carelessly handling a delicate figurine my mother had given me. My attention split between him and my father. Careful with that, I warned. It is fragile and has sentimental value. Kyle shrugged and put it down roughly. This place has too much breakable stuff anyway, not kid-friendly. Something about his dismissive attitude snapped the last thread of my patience. That is exactly the point, Kyle. This is my home set up the way I want it, filled with things that matter to me. I have no intention of child-proofing it or making it kid-friendly because I did not choose to have a child. You did. Jessica gasped at my bluntness. My father's face reddened further. How dare you speak to them that way? He said, his voice dangerously quiet. After everything I have done for you. What exactly have you done for me since Mom died, Dad? I asked, the question that had been building for 15 years finally finding voice. You remarried before I even graduated high school. You consistently prioritized Jessica's wants over my needs. You missed my college graduation because Jessica had a fender bender. You have never once visited this house until you wanted to take it from me. My father looked as though I had slapped him. That is not true. I have always been there for you. When? I pressed. When were you there for me? Because from where I stand, I have spent 15 years accommodating you, Diane and Jessica, while receiving very little in return. The room crackled with tension. Jessica had tears welling in her eyes, though whether from genuine hurt or tactical manipulation, I could not tell. You know what? Kyle said suddenly. This place is not even that great. The neighbor's dog barks all the time, and the basement looks like it might have mold. I turned to him, puzzled. You have been in my basement. When? He shifted uncomfortably. Just looking around yesterday while you were talking to Jessica in the garden. So you were exploring my house without permission, I clarified, growing more outraged by the minute. We were going to be living here, Jessica jumped in. We needed to see the whole space to plan. No, you were not going to be living here, I corrected. You wanted to live here. You assumed you would be living here, but that was never going to happen. My father had been unusually quiet for the last few exchanges. Now he stepped forward again, his expression cold. If this is your final decision, he said, you should understand the consequences. This will damage your relationship with the family, permanently. It was the threat he had held over me for years. Comply or be excluded. Agree or be alone. but this time it did not work. If the price of maintaining a relationship with you is surrendering my home, my boundaries, and my self-respect, then perhaps that relationship is not worth preserving, I replied, surprised by my own clarity and calm. Jessica let out a dramatic sob. How can you be so cruel? I am having a baby. Your niece or nephew. And I wish you all the best with your pregnancy and parenthood, I said sincerely. But that does not entitle you to my home. Kyle, seemingly bored with the emotional confrontation, wandered toward the kitchen. Whatever, we will just stay with your parents until we find something else. Their house is bigger anyway. Jessica shot him a warning look, but it was too late. I caught it immediately. So you have a backup plan already? I observed. This was not about having nowhere to go. This was about wanting my house specifically. Jessica flushed. That is not what Kyle meant. I think it is exactly what he meant, I countered. This was never about a desperate need for housing. This was about wanting a nice house you did not have to pay for. My father stepped between us. Enough. You have made your position clear, Alyssa, and I am very disappointed in your selfishness. I thought I raised you better than this. You did not raise me, Dad, I said quietly. Mom did. And then, after she died, I raised myself, and I think she would be proud of me for standing up for myself today. The truth of those words settled in the room like a physical presence. My father looked away, unable to meet my eyes. I think you should leave now, I said, moving toward the door. I am happy to discuss ways I can actually help Jessica and Kyle find appropriate housing, but this house is not an option. Diane gathered her purse, her mouth a thin line of disapproval. You will regret this decision, Alyssa. Family is all we have in this world. No, I replied. Self-respect is all we truly have, and I am not willing to sacrifice mine anymore. Jessica was crying in earnest now, whether from disappointment at losing the house or genuine emotional hurt, I could not tell. Kyle just looked annoyed that his easy housing solution had fallen through. My father was the last to move toward the door. He paused, looking around the house one more time, perhaps seeing for the first time how much of me, how much of my mother was infused in every corner. This is your final decision. He asked one last attempt at leverage. I nodded. It is. Then do not expect to be welcomed at family gatherings going forward, he said coldly. You have chosen a house over your family. No, Dad, I corrected him. I have chosen my boundaries over continued exploitation. There is a difference. He did not reply. They filed out the door, got into their separate cars, and drove away. My father did not look back. I closed the door behind them and leaned against it, my heart pounding. I had done it. I had stood my ground. The confrontation had been every bit as difficult as I had expected, but I had maintained my boundaries. I walked slowly through my house, touching the walls, the furniture, the photographs of my mother, this space that was mine, that I had fought for and protected. For the first time in years, perhaps since my mother died, I felt truly strong, truly myself. The tears came then, not tears of regret or sadness, but tears of release, of letting go of a pattern that had bound me for too long, of honoring what my mother had truly wanted for me, not to be a doormat, but to be my own person, with the strength to stand up for myself. I knew there would be fallout. Family friends might take sides, holidays would be complicated. But in that moment, I felt only a profound sense of peace. I had drawn a line. I had protected what was mine. And in doing so, I had reclaimed myself. 3 months after the confrontation, I sat in my garden sipping coffee and watching the tulips my mother had loved bloom in bright bursts of color. Spring had arrived, bringing with it a sense of renewal that mirrored my own internal transformation. The aftermath of standing my ground had been both challenging and liberating. As threatened, I had not been invited to the monthly family dinners. A few mutual family friends had reached out confused by the conflicting stories they were hearing. I had explained my position calmly, without vilifying my father or Jessica, and most had understood. Through the grapevine, I learned that Jessica and Kyle had indeed moved in with my father and Diane, temporarily. Within 2 weeks, tensions had developed. Kyle's band practicing in the garage had led to neighbor complaints. Jessica's expectations of being waited on had clashed with Diane's household rules. They had stayed only a month before moving into a subsidized apartment for expectant parents, exactly the type of place I had researched and offered to help them find. My relationship with my father remained strained, but not severed. He had called once ostensibly to let me know about a family health issue, but really I suspected to check whether I had softened my position. I had been cordial but firm. The house was still not available, but I was open to rebuilding our relationship on healthier terms. My confidence had grown in other areas of my life as well. At work, I had begun speaking up more in meetings, advocating for my ideas, rather than letting others take credit. I had set boundaries with a demanding client who had previously monopolized my time. I had even started dating again, meeting a kind and respectful man who valued my independence. The most meaningful changes had been in my connections with my mother's side of the family. I had rekindled relationships with aunts, uncles, and cousins who had gradually been edged out after my father remarried. They shared stories about my mother I had never heard, photos I had never seen. Through them, I developed a richer, more complete picture of her. My therapist had been right. Setting boundaries had not been selfish. It had been necessary for my well-being. The guilt my father and Diane had tried to instill had faded, replaced by a quiet certainty that I had done the right thing. One afternoon, I received a text message from an unknown number. It was Jessica letting me know she had given birth to a baby boy. Despite our conflict, I sent a gift basket with baby essentials and a card congratulating her. I did not attend the baby shower or request to visit, respecting the distance that had developed between us. To my surprise, she sent a brief thank you text with a photo of the baby. It was a small olive branch, but I accepted it for what it was. 6 months after our confrontation, my doorbell rang unexpectedly one Sunday afternoon. Through the security camera, I saw my father standing alone on the porch, his posture less confident than I remembered. I opened the door cautiously. "Dad?" "Alyssa." He nodded. "May I come in?" I hesitated, then stepped aside to let him enter. He stood awkwardly in my living room, looking around as though seeing it for the first time. In a way, perhaps he was. "Your garden looks nice," he said finally. "The tulips remind me of your mother." "That was the intention," I replied, unsure where this was heading. He sat down heavily on the edge of my sofa. "I have been doing some thinking about what you said that day, about me not being there for you after your mother died." I remained silent, waiting. "I may have," he cleared his throat, "prioritized my new family at the expense of my existing one. That was not right." It was not a full apology, but from my father, it was significant. I sat down across from him, maintaining the physical and emotional distance I had worked so hard to establish. "Why are you here, Dad?" I asked directly. He looked down at his hands. "Jessica and Kyle broke up. He left when the baby was 3 weeks old. Said he was not ready for fatherhood." "I am sorry to hear that," I said, and I meant it. Whatever my issues with Jessica, no new mother deserved to be abandoned. "She is struggling," he continued. "Diane is helping with the baby when she can, but she has her charity commitments." I tensed immediately, suspecting where this was going. "Dad, I am not offering my house." He looked up surprised. "No, that is not why I am here. Jessica is staying in the apartment. It is working out fine. She is actually growing up a bit, becoming more responsible." "Then what do you need from me?" I asked, still wary. "Nothing," he said, and the words seemed to cost him effort. "I am not here to ask for anything. I just thought maybe we could start to repair things between us, on new terms." I studied him, looking for signs of manipulation or hidden agendas. I saw only an aging man who had perhaps realized too late the damage his choices had caused. "New terms," I repeated. "What would those be?" "Mutual respect," he offered. "Acknowledgement of boundaries. I have been talking to a counselor. He suggested that my behavior toward you has been controlling." I almost laughed at the understatement, but managed to keep my expression neutral. "I would be open to attempting a new relationship," I said carefully. "One where my boundaries are respected and where I am not expected to constantly sacrifice for Jessica." He nodded slowly. That seems reasonable. We talked for an hour, not resolving everything, but laying the groundwork for a different kind of father-daughter relationship. One based on equality rather than authority, on mutual respect rather than obligation. Whether it would last remained to be seen, but it was a start. After he left, I walked through my home touching the walls, the photographs, the mementos of my mother. I realized that the inheritance she had left me was indeed about more than money. It was about independence, self-sufficiency, and the courage to stand up for myself. The house had become a symbol of something larger. It represented my journey from the accommodating daughter who swallowed her own needs to the confident woman who could articulate and defend her boundaries. By fighting for my home, I had fought for myself. A week later, I hosted a small gathering in my garden. Friends who had supported me through the conflict, a few cousins from my mother's side, and even my maternal grandmother, now in her 80s, but still sharp and feisty. We celebrated nothing in particular, and everything at once. The tulips, the sunshine, the family we choose, the boundaries we set, the strength we find when pushed to our limits. As we sat around the table I had set up under the apple tree my mother would have loved, I looked at the faces of these people who respected and valued me, who did not see me as a resource to be used or an obstacle to be manipulated, who saw me as Alyssa complete and worthy just as I was. In that moment, I understood what my mother had truly wanted for me. Not just financial security, but emotional security. Not just a physical home, but a sense of home within myself. A place where I belonged, where I was valued, where I was enough. Standing up to my family had been the hardest thing I had ever done. It had also been the most necessary. In protecting my house, I had found my home. In setting boundaries with others, I had made peace with myself. Have you ever had to stand up to family pressure to protect something important to you? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more journeys of self-discovery and standing up for yourself. And if you know someone who might need to hear this message, share it with them. Sometimes all we need is to know we are not alone in our struggles to find the courage to make a stand. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and remember, protecting your boundaries is not selfish. It is an act of self-love and self-respect that ripples out to create healthier relationships for everyone. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.